When she died during childbirth, while giving birth to her second child, where was the support from the state? Where was it for her husband, who struggled for years to be mom and dad to their two children and handle all of the responsibilities that come with that come with childbearing? Had to handle all of those by himself. So, what's up with all of these empty promises and all of the love and the support for the women and men who are left behind? Because women and girls do die, especially in the state, during childbirth. These are issues that real people are struggling with. Real people who are just trying to keep a roof over their heads and food on their tables. I thought about why this kind of political power and control in our male-dominated legislatures. I wondered why it's our priority every year, as it has been multiple times just this year. And I'm reminded that these are the same folks who call themselves pro-life, but prove time after time, year after year, that they don't seem to care about the living. During the height of the pandemic, they're the same ones who said COVID was a hoax and adamantly opposed mask mandates, temporary shutdowns, and later, even vaccinations. They're the same ones who continue to push people back to work before it was safe. For slave wages, knowing that nobody can live on and certainly shouldn't have to die, lose their life for $7.25 an hour. They're the same ones who push for and prioritize getting the lethal injection drugs and concealing the identities of the companies that make those drugs. They're the ones who added firing squads as another option to make sure no one on death row escapes capital punishment in this state. Even if they kill even if the state kills innocent men and women in the process, like it did to George Stinney Jr. They're also the ones who want to put guns in the hands of even reckless South Carolinians, without any training or concern about those who they know will do with those guns the same thing Dylann Roof did when he walked into Mother Emanuel and shot 9 people to death in cold blood, just because of the color of their skin. One of those people was a man who served with many of the men who were blocking us from even debating the hate crimes bill for the second year in a row. How can we call ourselves pro-life? Because I'm pro-life. For those of you who may not realize it, because I care about the living. My sister senators, all of us, are pro-life. We prove that every single day, inside and outside of this chamber. But how can we call ourselves pro-life as a body if we're not outraged when yet another young, unarmed black man or woman is gunned down here or across the country? Where is the concern for women who are already working multiple minimum wage jobs and still struggling to make it? Where's the accountability for the men who impregnate these women and girls? Some consensually, yes. Others by force. I know that there may be others who want to speak. I stand here today as a woman, as a mother, to what it takes to give birth and to raise a child in this state. And yet, I've got colleagues who I respect and serve with who have admitted they're not doctors. They don't understand. I was over 6 weeks pregnant when I found out that I was pregnant with my first son. And if my memory serves me correctly, I don't think I could even get an appointment with my OBGYN until I was at least 6 weeks pregnant. The ridiculousness that we are debating yet again here today is utterly unconscionable. We know that we cannot legislate morality. We also know that we aren't God. And yet, we love playing God on every legislative Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in this state. We even like to come back after the session is supposedly officially over, just to make sure that what the Supreme Court that had one woman justice on it at the time, what they deemed unconstitutional. The proponents of the 6-week ban have made sure that they get another opportunity to send this back to the Supreme Court, their all-male Supreme Court. So before I take my seat, I just want to say to all of the women and girls who are watching, who are listening, many of whom are here, we thank you. We see you. And when I say we, I'm speaking for at least the 5 of us in here. Understand, have firsthand knowledge about what it takes to carry a child to term, to carry a baby to term, to love that baby in the womb, to take care and to have the means to take care of ourselves in the process. I can remember going to my doctor when I was much younger and living at home. And because I was sick and in and out of hospitals as a child and wasn't diagnosed with sickle cell anemia until I came my freshman year at USC. My pediatrician, when I went back home, advised me that if I ever planned to have children, I should have them before or by the time I was 30. And I never thought that advice, that medical advice, would hit me so deeply. But it's something I never forgot. And I wonder why he said that. And I remember asking, and he said, because the older you get, the more likely you are to have complications during and beyond pregnancy. And guess what? I was blessed to be able to have my first son at 25, which was very young. I was actually in law school. And my second son at 30, because what he said stuck with me. And what we haven't said much from this well today is that every person who has spoken and given and shared a story about a constituent or a family member or a friend or themselves, guess what? The woman or girl who are at the center of those stories had one thing in common. It's called a choice. They had a choice. That's all we're asking. That's all we're asking. For the women and girls across South Carolina to have a meaningful choice, to make these decisions for themselves, like every other woman and girl has had. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator, you Mr. Russell.
You heard on the amendment.
Senator is recognized by Senator from Fairfield. Why he comes to the podium, Mr. Russell.
Yes, several questions. Before the Senator will be kind of adjourned.
Without objection. Senator from Garland, as he comes to the podium, state your complaint.
How much time is there for one thing debate after this celebration has occurred?
Yes, we check. For 15 minutes remaining, up to 15 minutes on this amendment. Yes, sir. Thank you. Senator from Beaufort recognized. Will you give the Senate your attention?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of the Senate. I want to talk in the few minutes that I have to talk on this amendment to something that I think has been absent from our debate over the last several hours. Quite frankly, from the debate earlier this year and late last year, September. And that is this going to survive constitutional challenge in the state Supreme Court? And unlike some of my colleagues, I respect the opinion that Justice Few wrote. I've studied the opinion very carefully. I've read the majority opinion with the other concurrences, I've read the dissents. And I think that his opinion is well reasoned. And I think he's been unfairly maligned, quite frankly, in some respects. Senator Morenberg has been accused of engaging in substantive due process, which is the finding of implicit rights pursuant to the due process clause. That's not what he's doing. He's trying to interpret what does the explicit privacy clause in the state constitution mean. So I think there have been a lot of cheap shots taken at him in that regard. I'm persuaded, moreover, by his analysis of how the right to privacy in the state constitution should be construed. I think he properly looked at the West report in its full context. I think he made some good arguments in regard to interpreting explicit text, and I wanted to make that point. I also think that he approaches this issue in much the same way that I approach it. He recognizes that we don't have one right at stake. We don't have the right of the unborn child at stake, nor do we have the right to a woman to sovereignty over her body at stake. We have, in fact, competing rights. And I think implicit in his decision, actually explicit in his decision, is that there is a balancing between those particular rights. The right to a woman's privacy and the right to a choice of whether to have an abortion, and the right of the state to ensure that an unborn child achieves a live birth. And that's always been the way I've looked at this. I've always looked at it as being a balancing of rights. And I looked at it more generally in the context of, as we move along the 9-month continuum, that one right eventually yields to the other. I don't think that Justice Blackmun in Roe v. Wade was correct in finding within the penumbra of the rights in the federal constitution a right to abortion or a right to privacy that then it was inferred to include a right to abortion. But I do think that as a matter of legislative analysis, as a matter of public policy analysis, he engaged in the right exercise. He looked at two rights. He looked at how those rights compare with each other over time. And ever since I was in law school, I admired that approach because it wasn't absolute on one side or the other. I respect my friend from Anderson, Senator Cash a lot, and he has moral convictions. He's intellectually honest. He's fearless. I think he brought something to this chamber that was lacking, and I think the Senate has been better for him having been here. But having said that, I fundamentally disagree with the proposition that there is a moral equivalence between the moment the sperm fertilizes the egg and a kindergartner sitting in a classroom. I do not believe that there is a moral equivalence there. I do not believe that the state's duty to protect life is equivalent there. I don't think that you can extend by analogy the state's obligation to protect the life of a child in a classroom to protecting a fertilized egg and making sure that it progresses into a live, born human being. I just fundamentally differ from him in that regard. In fact, I differ with the whole personhood approach to looking at this issue, which by definition recognizes only one right in the context of a pregnancy, and only recognizes the right to that fertilized egg to develop and be born into a human being. It doesn't recognize whatsoever the right of a woman to sovereignty over her body. So I fundamentally reject that. That's why last September I filibustered the personhood bill, or a bill that would have imposed the ban. I did not think that was appropriate. I did not think that was good public policy. I thought that was unconstitutional, and that's why I did what I did. Now, in looking at Justice Hughes' opinion, because irrespective of whether or not we adopt the Senator Fletcher's amendment, which is a 12-week ban, or whether we adopt the underlying amended bill by the House or a 6-week ban, I think there has been a lack of the things that caused Justice Hughes some concerns. He says, in fact, that in the decision striking down the first fetal heartbeat law, he says, quote, the state essentially boasts to this court that the General Assembly did not even consider the question being whether or not 6 weeks or the heartbeat ban gave a woman a reasonable access or right to abortion. In fact, he cites the fact that the leadership of the House and the Senate admitted in its supplemental finding that they didn't consider that question, that they didn't think it was relevant. I do think it's relevant. And I think it would be an abrogation of our obligation not to have a discussion in regard to whether or not that does provide reasonable access, because then we'll be right before that court again. And he's going to, and I want Justice Hughes' vote on this. I don't want to have the constitutionality of an abortion bill decided because a man replaced a woman on the state Supreme Court. I think that would be a horrible look for this state. I think that we need to focus in on what were Justice Hughes' concerns and make sure that we address them. Because, look, we are a three-branch government. Everybody has their role. We make the laws, the executive executes the laws, and the Supreme Court interprets the law. And that's been the case in the United States ever since Margaret Vernon Madison, really, judicial review. The whole doctrine that it is the province of the Supreme Court, the unique province of the U.S. Supreme Court, to interpret the laws and decide what's constitutional. And by analogy, that's also the role that our state Supreme Court plays. And simply sloughing off his opinion as legislating from the bench or substantive due process, in my opinion, that's intellectually lazy. That is not what Justice Hughes did. Justice Hughes, quite frankly, looked at our bill and found flaws. We found that there was a right of a woman to informed consent. What else is he supposed to do once we make that finding in the bill other than make an inquiry as to whether or not that fact is true? So I wanted to make those points clear. Now, in regard to the debate and in regard to whether or not 6 weeks provides an opportunity, I think that there is some discussion we can have. Okay, because the underlying bill that's right before us now, presented by the House, talks about what a clinically diagnosable pregnancy is. It means, quote, the point in time it is possible to determine that a woman is pregnant due to the detectable presence of HCG. Okay? HCG is a chemical, you know, and look, I feel like I'm mansplaining up here, but I gotta learn these things. It is detectable within 2 to 3 days after a fertilized egg implants into the uterine wall. Okay? That's the pregnancy test that you take when you urinate on a strip. Okay? 2 to 3 days after implantation, you can detect. And every day thereafter, the HCG becomes more and more and more prevalent. Okay? So in making this inquiry as to whether or not a 6-week period of time affords a reasonable opportunity, let's have a discussion and let's let the Supreme Court know that we're talking about whether or not we're providing that amount of time. I think you can make an argument that if HCG is detectable within 2 or 3 days after implantation, and if it continues to increase in intensity and in presence in a urinalysis subsequent to that time, I think you can make an argument that there is a window of time. Well, we have to have that conversation. We simply state in conclusory terms, either are for or against, yes, it's enough time, or no, it's not enough time, and we don't dig into the facts and the underlying criteria by which the Supreme Court can say, okay, General Assembly, you've looked at these facts, you have considered them in good faith, you've made a reasonable determination, and if we do that, we are entitled to deference. Justice Pugh recognizes that this General Assembly is entitled to deference. His objection was, Senator Sparker, that the prior record in regard to Peter Heartbeat 1, there were no testimony, no findings, no consideration. In fact, he cites in a footnote that leadership in the House and the Senate stated unequivocally, we didn't consider those things, we don't think it was important. I think if we want to get his vote, okay, and I want to get his vote, okay, I think it's important for legitimacy of what we do. I don't want to win, I don't want to have something sustained or held constitutional because we've had one female justice who voted to strike down the law replaced by somebody who might not strike it down. I think that would do us harm. Okay? So let's have a conversation about this. HCG in the pregnancy tests are detectable 2 to 3 days after implantation. The Cleveland Clinic, okay, one of the preeminent healthcare institutions in the United States, says that home pregnancy test, urinalysis, urine test, 99% effective. Okay, so let's take those factors into consideration. A pregnancy test is going to reveal positive whether you have HCG, which indicates that you're pregnant, or that you have a fertilized egg that's implanted in the uterine wall within 2 to 3 days after implantation. Those pregnancy tests are 99% accurate. I think we can have a conversation then about whether or not that provides an opportunity of time, a window of time, for which a woman can then exercise a choice. There are pros and cons against that, but I think it's important that the Supreme Court recognize that this very issue of access, this very issue of whether or not 6 weeks is a reasonable burden on privacy, is discussed by this body, and that we're considering the underlying medical facts.
Senator Spartanburg, Senator Kimball, all purpose.
Mr. President, Senator Gill for a question.
Senator Gill.
So, Senator, I've read Justice Pugh's opinion on this matter, and I will tell you, having read through it again even today, I still agree with Justice Kittredge and have a difference of opinion with Justice Pugh. But I will say this, as we were talking about legislative intent before, do you know that I now view, while I still disagree with his conclusion, his opinion is not a radical trampling of legislative right? Do you know that
I know that you do, and the reason I said that is not by statements made in this chamber, but in the House, stating that what we have is legislating from the bench, what we have is substantive due process of the kind that was exercised in Roe v. Wade. And I was trying to point out, quite frankly, that that is not what happened here. This is not substantive due process and finding implicit rights to the due process clause. It is interpreting an explicit provision in the state constitution.
it's not creating the numbers to Blackman's opinion, as you mentioned in Roe? So as we talk about legislative intent, because we know in reading Justice Pugh's opinion, he actually cited debates that happened in these chambers, in legislative chambers, about how he came to his conclusion. I think if we're talking legislative intent, do you now feel, because I think this is a point you're making, and I want to be explicitly clear, that defining a medically diagnosable pregnancy versus just picking a moment in time provides that balancing of rights you speak of in your remarks here today. In other words, defining a medically diagnosable pregnancy gives Justice Pugh some guardrails, if you will, to what our intent is and provides a non-arbitrary definition that's achievable.
And that's the key word. He objected to the arbitrariness of it, because he said that these decisions were made by the General Assembly in the absence of any discussion, of any consideration, and he said that is the very definition of arbitrary. And so I think by having this conversation, by talking about, okay, the bill speaks to a clinically diagnosable pregnancy, the bill speaks to the fact that HCG can be detected. We know that HCG can be detected within 2 to 3 days after the implantation of a fertilized egg in the uterine wall. We know that pregnancy tests, according to the Cleveland Clinic, one of the preeminent healthcare institutions of the country, are 99% effective. I think those are material facts for us to discuss and consider, and for the Supreme Court to see us discussing and considering them when deciding upon whether or not we have struck a reasonable balance considering relevant factors.
But Senator, in the mindful time drawing here, I would just say, did you know, I appreciate the presentation you made on this. I agree with you that I would rather have convinced Justice Pugh the merits of this bill and not win just by replacing a justice. I'd like Justice Pugh to be on board too, and I hope the discussion we've had today here and changing the bill achieve that goal. I appreciate your remarks.
Thank you, Senator from Fairfield.
Senator, you have a few questions?
Senator, question.
Senator, just a few minutes ago, you said that there's some underlying facts that we ought to discuss about perhaps viability at certain levels of knowing whether someone's pregnant. Is that what you were talking about a few minutes ago?
I think specifically what I'm talking about is, in reading Justice Pugh's opinion, I recognize that there was a footnote referencing what the Senator from Sumter, Senator McAfee, had some questions in regard to whether or not 6 weeks was enough time. Senator from Colleton and Senator from Matthews was also cited in that opinion in his footnotes. And so it occurred to me that, you know, as we're debating this matter, it isn't necessarily important that we have findings of fact embedded within the four corners of the bill itself, but I think it is important for the record, especially when you have a state Supreme Court justice that was the deciding vote, saying that there's no evidence that this was considered at all. So I felt like one of the things absent from this conversation was a discussion about whether or not 6 weeks was ample amount of time.
Senator, the time has
And you know that you have to do something in culture so that we won't be able to debate the very thing you told us we should debate.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is,
Mr. President.
the adoption amendment, Senator from Anderson, Senator Cash.
Respectfully, I renew my motion to table the amendment.
Mr. President, Taylor motion's out of order.
That's not in, under the rule, under the order, under closure, it would be straight on the adoption or not of the amendment.
You got on TV, you got on TV.
And the question is the adoption, roll call, has been requested, 1, 2, 3, numerous. The appropriate number have seconded that motion on roll call. This would be a straight up vote on the adoption of Amendment 2A.
Mr. President,
Before we start the roll call, state your question.
this is amendment 2A, is this amendment by Senator Sheehan with the 12-week?
That is the amendment is under consideration of the 12-week, Senator from Lexington, Senator Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator from Lexington, Senator.
This is a direct vote.
Straight up, yes.
Straight up.
Not straight up. The adoption of
Vote yes.
the amendment.
For 12 weeks.
Reading clerk, call the roll.
12 weeks.
Mr. Adams? No. Mr. Alexander? No. Mr. Allen? Aye. Mr. Bennett? No. Mr. Campson? No. Mr. Cash? No. Mr. Clymer? No. Mr. Corbin? No. Mr. Cromer? No. Mr. Davis? Aye. Mr. Fanning? Aye. Mr. Gamble? No. Mr. Gill? No. Mr. Goldfish? No. Mr. Brewer? No. Mrs. Gustafson?
Yes. Aye.
Mrs. Gustafson votes aye. Mr. Harpootlian? Aye. Mr. Henry? No. Mr. Hutto? Aye. Mr. Jackson? Aye. Mr. Kevin Johnson?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Michael Johnson? No. Mr. Kimbrell? No. Mr. Kempson?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Loftus? No. Mr. Malloy. Aye. Mr. Martin.
No.
No. Mr. Massey. No. Mrs. Matthews. Aye. Mr. McElveen. Aye. Mr. McLeod. Aye. Mr. Peeler. No. Mr. Rankin. Aye. Mr. Rickenbaugh. No. Mr. Rice. No. Mr. Sapp. Aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott not voting. Mrs. Sin. Aye. Mr. Sexler. Aye. Mrs. Shealy. Aye. Mr. Stevens. No. Mr. Kelly. No. Mr. Turner. No. Mr. Burton. No. Mr. Williams. Aye. Mr. Young. No.
Senator Scott votes aye. Senator Stevens votes aye. All senators vote. All senators vote. Poll will close. Clerk, tabulate. By a vote of 21 to 25, the amendment is not adopted. Pursuant to the motion, we'll stand in need momentarily.
Y'all are into the amendments. Brad, what you got? What you got, Brad? What is it?
Unless y'all want to belong, put up more amendments, speak to the briefly on those votes. You want to do amendments? You got 5,
Mr. Corbett. Aye. Mr. Cromer. Aye. Mr. Davis. Aye. Mr. Fanning. No. Mr. Gamble. Aye. Mr. Garrett. Aye. Mr. Goldfish. Aye. Mr. Grooms. Aye. Mrs. Gustafson. Not voting, Mr. Hopwood. No. Mr. Henry. Aye. Mr. Hutto. No. Mr. Jackson. No. Mr. Kevin Johnson. No. Mr. Michael Johnson. Aye. Mr. Kimbrell. Aye. Mr. Kempson.
No.
No. Mr. Locks. Aye. Mr. Malloy. No. Mr. Martin. Aye. Mr. Massey. Aye. Mrs. Matthews. No. Mr. McElveen. No. Mr. McLeod. Mr. McLeod votes no. Mr. Peeler. Aye. Mr. Rankin. Aye. Mr. Rickenbaugh. Aye. Mr. Rice. Aye. Mr. Sapp. No. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott. No. Mrs. Sin. No. The Sexler. No. Mrs. Shealy. No. No. Mr. Talbot. Aye. Mr. Turner. Aye. Mr. Burton. Aye. Mr. Williams. No. Mr. Young. Aye.
Have all senators voted? Have all senators voted? Senator Garrison votes no. Have all senators voted? By call. Have all members voted? Poll closed. The clerk will tabulate. Tabulating the votes. Senator from Georgetown. What purpose do you rise, sir?
Unanimous consent.
State your request.
I'd like to get unanimous consent for myself, for leave until January.
Without objection. So, Senator from Georgetown has leave
Mr. President?
in January. Thank you for your service. Senator Collins, what purpose do you rise?
Just unanimous. We were counting on the senator from Georgetown not having you today, so he could have called. We could retroactively let him know.
Senate will be in order. Senate will be in order. Vote of 27 to 19. The Senate concurs. The House. Thank you, sir. Senator from Sutton. What purpose do you rise, sir?
Mr. President, Mr. President, I would request for the next meeting today, the Senate adjourned in memory of Mr. Henry Allen McFadden. Henry was a long-time, well-known CPA in my area of Summer. Wonderful and very active with the Presbyterian Church. Came from an outstanding family, and he passed away after a long inspiration battle of illness this past Friday, surrounded by his friends, family, and all. Would adjourn.
Without objection, the Senate next available. Adjourned. Senator from Richmond, Senator Scott. Unanimous. Is there objection to the unanimous consent? Senator from Darlington, what purpose do you ask?
I object. I would ask the unanimous consent only meeting match.
Is there objection to the unanimous consent request that we go to the box for the purpose of reading the magistrates that are in the box? Is there objection to that unanimous consent request? Hearing no objection, we will be in the box for that purpose. Please give.
Christopher Arrakis of Myrtle Beach. Bradley Mayers of Conway. William Hudson of Anna. Mr. Margaret Livingston of Conway. Manuela Clayton of Myrtle Beach. Mr. Mark Ashley Harris of Dolores. Mr. Monty Harrelson of Greenville.
Pending question is confirmation of the Albany County magistrates. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those no, ayes have it. Magistrates, Albany County are confirmed. Read your reading.
Suffolk County delegation reported favorable reappointment of two Suffolk County magistrates, Judge Cecil Jackson of Sumter and Mr. W. Madison Campbell of Sumter.
Question is confirmation of the Suffolk County magistrates. Those in favor of the Suffolk County magistrates say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. They're confirmed. Let's continue.
Richland County delegation reported favorable reappointment or appointment of the following Richland County magistrates. Mrs. Deidre Wilson Hightower, Columbia. Judge Deirdre L. Simmons of Columbia. Miss Barbara Jo Walford Hancock of Columbia. The Honorable Stella E. Thomas of Columbia. Mrs. Christina Thompson of Elton. Miss Margaret Strong Williams of Columbia. Timothy Edmond of Columbia. Mallory Morris Perlman of Columbia.
That's what I'm afraid of.